How's it going, guys? So I did just want to make a really quick video. Now that the new Yarkshire Gamer Best Manufacturer Award has just been awarded to Victrix Miniatures, and the reason why I wanted to make this video is I feel like we're starting era, a new era of miniature wargaming. So I think this is actually kind of a pretty telling outcome, and it says a lot about the state of the hobby. Victrix, who full disclosure, I voted for in this competition for this round. Victrix has beaten the Perrys, and in some ways, the kings of miniature manufacturing have been dethroned here. The kings have lost their crown to Victrix. So if you look at this, you look at the brackets for the game. I think this is actually, like, for the competition, I think this is pretty telling, and it's actually it's a little nutty, and it kind of says a lot about the way the hobby's been going. So we've got Victrix pretty much crushed all before them to be the top nominee on their side. The Perrys were seeded first, so they didn't have to go through the first round of competition. Crushed their opponents on their side. What I think is very telling actually about this is the manufacturers we have going up in the semifinals. So we have Victrix versus Pendragon, which I think Pendragon's a great company, nothing against them. And part of this is the way the bracket is set up, but I would have thought in the semifinals we might see more battles between the big companies, the big plastic companies, but instead we've got these smaller companies kind of vying in there. So I guess, looking at Pendragon's bracket, you would kind of expect, maybe Gripping Beast to do a little better over here, right? And I'm just talking about, and I'm just going to speak my views on the hobby. I love metal miniatures. In fact, I prefer, in many cases, metals to plastics. But I think the way the hobby is going is plastic, okay? And I think the number one factor for me a lot of times is cost. If you want to do big armies, you just can't really do them entirely in metal. That's just sort of the reality. You are going to need to bulk out your forces with plastics, unless your pockets are very deep indeed. So I think, a miniature maker has to be plastics to really be top tier. And part of that too, there's a lot of investment that is required to set up a plastic company versus metals. Metals, obviously the metal is what makes the miniature expensive. The molds for metals are relatively affordable to produce. By contrast, plastic, the material is basically worthless, but making the manufacturing capacity for the plastic is hugely expensive, where you have to really sell a lot of plastics to make your money back for each set. So I think it's really interesting that Gripping Beast, who was one of the early plastic adopters, whose I think plastics are honestly quite lackluster, did not make it far despite, basically like promoting the Saga games and all the different, the Saga stuff. That's a huge part of the hobby, but yet Gripping Beast faltered. I think it's because their plastics are somewhat lacking, okay? And that's just my honest opinion. Sorry, Gripping Beast. I have some of your plastics. They're just not quite on the modern level, but that's despite Gripping Beast being one of the earliest plastic producers. They just have not really evolved their sets. Okay, we look at this other side of the bracket. I think that's an interesting result. Bad Squiddo beats Footsore. No real comment there. Perry versus Bacchus. I'm sure I don't have any Bacchus figures. I've heard Peter Pig's a really good company too. I'm, not throwing shade on any of these companies, but not really a surprise to me that the Perrys crushed all before them here. Again, I think these companies are probably great, but I think the Perrys are probably pretty clearly better. So whatever. Okay, so now on this side of the bracket, it gets interesting again. Okay. So Empress versus Wargames Atlantic. Now this is kind of surprising. Wargames Atlantic what I would personally see is, again, one of the big companies getting knocked out in the first round versus Empress, who I would see as kind of a smaller company. Now, I don't think Empress are, when I say, I think for metal, they're not the smallest company, they're not the biggest company, they're kind of maybe medium sized. I've got some of the Empress World War II stuff. I think it's excellent. I really love it. But man, Empress Miniatures knocking out War Games Atlantic, who have, all this plastic capacity and whatnot. That is kind of surprising to me. And then Warlord Games getting knocked out by Bloody Miniatures. Now, that is really surprising. Now, I wonder if part of it is the people who, watch Yorkshire Gamer. I feel like Yorkshire Gamer is not a huge, like, World War II guy, so maybe that's, like, part of it. I feel like he's not a huge Napoleonic guy. I know Bloody Miniatures has their, some people really like that company, but man, Bloody Miniatures is a tiny miniature company, right? Tiny. And they knocked out Warlord Games, who, at one time were trying to be the biggest and baddest in the industry, okay? So, I don't know, maybe it's just like my bias. I would have kind of expected this final showdown to maybe be like Warlord versus Perry, War Games Atlantic versus Victrix or something, because those are the companies I really feel I see as competitors. Like Victrix and Pendragon, they're both in very like different niches of the hobby, right? Whereas Victrix and War Games Atlantic kind of occupy the same niche in many ways. Same with Perry and Warlord, right? I feel like Perry does not really compete with Empress so much, right? I feel like Perry more competes with Warlord Games in the market anyways. So I think this is kind of an interesting insight into the industry. And Victrix won, and I think it's a well-deserved win. But I think it says a lot about where the state of the hobby right now, where we're at, and the fact that Victrix has really pushed the hobby forward in terms of the plastics they've been able to produce lately. And this, I feel like, to me, seems like the dawn of a new era. And I'll kind of go into that a little bit, talk about that. So this is not going to be a super edited video. I mean, this is going to be me rambling somewhat about miniature manufacturers and the way I see the industry right now. This is kind of coming to, I don't know, I'm kind of the kind of person when I wake up in the morning and I don't want to get out of bed and go to work. I kind of like to scope out what's going on in the miniature world, look at their different pages. Maybe you're the same. You wake up before your alarm and you got like 15 minutes before you get out of bed and whatnot. So that's kind of where I'm drawing some of my speculation from over the years. But anyways, let's go over to Victrix's page. So here we go, Victrix. So what do they say? Historical Miniature Manufacturers World Cup winners. It's been a great pleasure to share the Victrix and the crown, the winner of the Historical Miniatures World Cup held over at Yarkshire Games. I voted for Victrix in this round. I think they deserved it. I thought it was kind of cool. They talk about their story. They start out as a family company in the family basement, and he talks about how his sons worked with him in the business, and then they're now going into the army. So I think that's all cool, and I think that's pretty cool that they're like a family business and they have that tight bond and that military connection, blah blah blah. So hats off to them. I gotta say, I was looking at some of these pictures they posted. Yeah, these guys are cool. Nothing wrong with them. Cool Vikings. Well, these are good. This picture really stuck out to me. This is their like 12 mil stuff, which is interesting. So the 12 mil stuff I'm going to talk about in a second. I actually did buy the starter set for this stuff, and I can actually show them off maybe at some point. I was just doing them as a side project. The 12 mil stuff from Victrix is actually very nice. But where was I going with this? Okay, the competition in the hobby. I feel like this Victrix World War II 12 mil stuff, there seems like a direct response to me to Warlord Games Epic Scale. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's kind of funny, in the past, right? Victrix has done their historicals in 28 mil, their ancient stuff in 28 mil. Warlords focus, I think 95% of their business, Warlord Games business, is really World War II. So Victrix does, the 12 mil stuff. And then Warlord Games has been doing their Epic range, and they've kind of almost been overlapping with Victrix. Now they're doing their Punic Wars Epic range. So it's interesting, I think, that these plastic manufacturers, and now even in the past week, we've got Wargames Atlantic is coming out with their own epic scale samurai stuff. I think that's interesting that all the plastic companies, basically within a couple years of each other, have all decided to go basically an epic range. Like the Victrix stuff is basically epics for World War II. The Warlord Games has their different epic ranges, and now Wargames Atlantic is doing their own epics range. Okay, this is one I thought looked awesome just from that little thumbnail on the side. Hats off to whoever's project this is. This is the kind of thing I like to see personally. This masked armies. Yep, great. Okay. Oh, this is pretty sweet. What was I really? There was something in here I wanted to talk about. Okay, amazing phalangites. This is like really next level painting to me. I think these look incredible. And this is actually pretty inspirational the way they've done the armor here. But anyways, not what I wanted to talk about. Okay, family picture, winner, hops. Okay, now, where we're going with the plastics world, Victrix is entering the 28 millimeter World War II scene. And if I was Warlord Games, I might be a little scared. Okay. And what I was kind of trying to get to here is I feel like we're entering into this new era of the hobby. And if you rewind in the hobby, maybe, I guess, almost like 10 years ago at this point, you rewind in the hobby 10 years ago, there is very little in the way of plastics on the market. Plastics are really just emerging. And we got a couple people in the forefront. So we got Perry Miniatures, run by the Perry brothers, of course, who have a ton of plastics experience from their times at Games Workshop. Super experienced sculptors running their own company, and I'm sure they were probably really rich before launching Perry Miniatures. And I feel like they kind of, one thing I do admire about the Perrys is they make miniatures for themselves. That is really my take on their business. Is they make miniatures for themselves and other people buy them. I don't think anyone else is able to do that. Like the Franco-Prussian War stuff, would that really be, if someone else other than the Perrys did it, would it be viable, economically viable? But the Perrys don't care. They love that, so they just do it. And then you have Warlord Games in the scene. I think a lot of their early plastics kind of suck, to be honest. But at the time, they're learning. I don't begrudge them that. You have Gripping Beast come out with some of the earlier plastics, which, again, I think they kind of suck, to be honest. But, some of them are okay. But I think generally they kind of suck. But, there isn't anything else out in the market. And Victrix stuff, when Victrix stuff came out initially, I don't think it was bad, but it wasn't great either. And I think there was an interesting time, and this was actually kind of right when I started to get into the hobby, around maybe like 2016 or 2017. No, it wasn't 2016. It must have been 2017 or 2018 when I really started getting into the hobby. Between Warlord Games stuff, Victrix stuff, Gripping Beast, they weren't that different at that stage. And at that time, I think Perry was really making the best plastic stuff. I think if you look at the Perry stuff, like it's just I think it's kind of, here, we'll go over to Perry. I brought them up here. Going to the Perry stuff. I mean, this is some of the newer stuff at the top. Sorry, I'm scrolling fast. But if you go down to like the earlier sets that they're producing at the time, like I think the Civil War might have even been one of the first one they did. It's, the figures themselves are like pretty basic, I would say, but they're just very nicely sculpted in the Perry style. They blend perfectly with the Perry metals, very consistent in that way. Are the figures doing anything especially exciting? I'm going to say no, but it just works. Again, especially it's like, I think they were really going for making mass battles affordable for people in the gunpowder age. And I think these sets, I mean, they really accomplished that. No shame on that. Um, they just look good, but they're kind of basic. They look good, but they're basic. You look at some of their plastics here. Um, Even their recent, I mean, their earliest stuff, I mean, I think was the Vikings. Not sure if it was this particular set, but man, these are some pretty, you know, I mean, they awful? No, but they're just not really close to where Victrix plastics are today, right? And just going back to Victrix, we'll scroll through Facebook quickly to their first posts back in the day. The Greek stuff, the Napoleonic stuff. I mean, okay, this set was actually when they're starting to get a little better with their plastics, I think. But the hoplites, the armored hoplites, I think were their first one. Come on. Okay, we're we're getting into the weeds of the early Victrix here. All right, come on. The Carthaginians. All right, I don't think they even have any posts of those early Greeks. Okay, actually, look at this. We'll throw in an extra 2 sprues of slingers or archers totally free. They're not doing that anymore with 3 boxes of new Greeks. Okay, Jesus Christ. Now, holy shit. Okay, I didn't even realize they did airplanes, which obviously they don't do these anymore. I don't know what happened with that. I guess it was just not, it just wasn't financially working for them there. Okay. Yeah, I mean, whatever. I mean, this is a little later than their hoplites, but again, I mean, are these figures bad? No, but they're very static, very crude in comparison to what is being produced today. Okay, so where are we going with this massive ramble? And I know this ramble has been going on way too long. But anyways, maybe if you're painting, you know, it's worthwhile listening. I don't know. You tell me. Give me feedback, negative or positive. The point here is, you know, there was a time when the manufacturers were not so different in their quality, but Victrix has just come through, and really, I think, taken the market by storm, and by the way they've been able to improve and just really drive forward the progress. And I think for the longest time, the Perrys really had the best plastic figures, but not anymore. Victrix has the best plastic figures on the market now, I think. And I mean, that's my opinion. You could say I'm wrong. The Perry stuff is great, but I feel like Warlord has really fallen behind in many ways, especially the Ancients. I mean, the World War II stuff, I think they have improved, but I think in terms of their sales, I would guess Bolt Action is over 90% of their sales. Maybe I could be wrong. And Warlord Games is interesting. I mean, John Stallard, the founder of Warlord Games, he had some big ambitions. He really wanted to make the Games Workshop of historicals, and that is something actually War Games Foundry had been trying to do before then. You know, be the one-stop shop. We have every historical range. We have the armies laid out. We've got the paints and whatever. I think War Games Foundry fell on some hard times. I don't think they were able to fully execute that vision. I mean, I love War Games Foundry. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm going to be putting an order in for their holiday sale. Believe me on that. We're going heavy into the Greeks, but you know, they weren't quite able to become that like Games Workshop of historicals. And I think Warlord Games was trying to do that next, right? They're trying to become the Games Workshop of historicals. They have paint sets on there. They've got all the different historical ranges. They were introducing plastics, blah blah blah. But I don't know. I don't think they quite got there. I think the Warlord Games stuff, it just varies too much in quality. A lot of the way Warlord Games set up their empires by purchasing other companies, which I think was not a good. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't own a business, so who am I to critique other people's business strategy? But I feel like the Warlord Games model, it's too complicated. Like all these different products with different that don't match up, blah 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 blah. I don't know. I don't know. I could be totally wrong, but I feel like Warlord Games is kind of stumbling a little bit. Um, and then the other company I wanted to talk about, who kind of stormed onto the scene, so we got War Games Atlantic. So I mentioned they came up with their whatever grand battle scale just recently, which is the samurai stuff. That, I mean, that's not a coincidence, right? That comes out at the same time. Victrix is doing the 12 mil stuff. The Warlord is doing the epic stuff, which I think kind of inspired it all. I think War Games Atlantic, this was a good business strategy of theirs, is doing this Age of Chivalry Barons War tie-in. I mean, this stuff looks to me like, honestly, I'm almost tempted to get some. I mean, I don't have the cash really to, or space. I mean, I just can't invest in like another project at the moment. But this stuff actually looked to me pretty good, better than their usual offerings. So I think they were able to hit some good notes there. Interesting enough, what does Victrix do? As soon as War Games Atlantic launches this, Victrix, and sorry, I'm gonna give you a seizure here really quick. Victrix, blah 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 blah. Sorry for the seizure. Victrix has launched their own like knights in the exact same period, right? The exact same period as the War Games Atlantic stuff, and both of these sets have come out exactly the same time. Is that a coincidence? I really don't think so. All right, now here's interesting again in the plastic wars. Playtesters wanted, dear dear wargamers, over the past year or so, we've been secretly working on a very exciting project, our very own war game. The first stage of playtesting is complete. All right, so this is interesting. I've seen other people talk about it on podcasts, is that one way to sell miniatures is to have rules to go with your miniatures. That is why Gripping Beast got into Saga. It was to sell their Dark Ages miniatures. Warlord Games has the Hail Caesar and Black Powder and all that to sell their miniatures. Victrix is now getting into that too. Okay, we got competition heating up. I will talk about one last thing. I think War Games Atlantic entering the fray as like a very new company has definitely caused a little bit of a kerfuffle. I think it's interesting in a number of aspects. So back in the day, like War Games Atlantic, they would do all these teasers for sets, and they've kind of stopped doing that a little bit to the same extent they used to. Like War Games Atlantic said they were going to release a whole Dark Ages range. And what did they do? They like decided to entirely drop it, right? They decided to entirely drop the Dark Age range. They came out with two sets, and then they came out with their legionaries, their late Roman legionaries, and they came out with their Goths. And then Victrix just dumped an entire complete late Roman range on the market and just destroyed War Games Atlantic. I mean, that's my take on that situation. Victrix just eliminated them, and that is why War Games Atlantic hasn't released any of these promised sets. Like War Games Atlantic was saying, well, look, we're going to do Franks, we're going to do various different kinds of late Roman legionaries, blah, blah, blah. None of that has come to the light of day, and I think it is because Victrix, and I think it is entirely because Victrix dropped their stuff, right? Direct competitor. And the Victrixes did it better. Sorry, War Games Atlantic, that's just kind of the reality there. Okay, another example. War Games Atlantic says they're going to release World War II Italians. Literally, and again, like I'm on the email lists for these companies. I like to look, it's kind of what I like to look at before I get out of bed in the morning and start my day. Uh, War Games Atlantic now announced they're doing World War II Italians. Like basically within like a week, Warlord Games drops an entire Italian range, including multiple box sets. Like that, it just can't be a coincidence, right? Direct competition. I'll give you another one. War Games Atlantic announced they were going to do plastic Bavarian infantry for the Franco-Prussian War. Perry says they're doing plastic Bavarian infantry for the Franco-Prussian War. And guess what? We never hear about that Warlord Games plastic Bavarian set again, right? So I think the competition is pretty stiff in the plastics market. Like they're all competing against each other, dropping these sets. Gripping Beast, I feel like is really lagging behind. They released some Parthian cataphracts, which I'm kind of somewhat interested in because I think they'll blend well with some metal Sasanian Persians I have, but that's another story. That's a Gripping Beast plastic set I might buy in the future. But overall, their plastics are just not. Plastics just are not very good. Excuse me. And like a while back ago, they posted some potential Normans on their Facebook page. Like, oh, we're experimenting with doing a plastic Norman set. Victrix like drops their Normans and just blows those so hard out of the water. Gripping Beast has never mentioned those Normans again because it's just like embarrassing. Like it really was just embarrassing how much worse they were than the Victrix ones. Just like destroyed in the most brutal way. Okay, in my opinion. And look, they haven't brought them up again since. They might have even deleted it off their Facebook page. I don't know. But if you check back, I mean, it did happen. And you'll notice like Gripping Beasts, like what have they done? They've done lately. I mean, I have some of these sets, like don't get me wrong, but I just wouldn't really buy them right now. They did, in terms of recent stuff, they did the Dark Ages Celtic dudes, like the Irish and the Picts, and they did these Parthian cataphracts, which this is one I might pick up one day just because I think they would blend well with metals, but like compare these, and now just looking at them, I'm kind of like not super impressed. I mean, these would just be filler, but man, compare these to the Victrix cataphracts, it's like another species, right? Okay, so that's kind of been the ramble. Again, kind of summing it up, I feel like we're kind of in the dawn of a new era. Victrix has taken the lead in this competition, and I think that's a telling sign for the future. The Victrix is really kind of the future of wargaming here. The plastics are just getting better. I'm really excited to see what's coming in the future. I think it's going to be onwards and upwards. I think it's just interesting the way our hobby has evolved over the past few years. And again, I think the Perry's being dethroned is kind of a symbolic event. So if you listen this far, hats off to you, and we'll see you in the next video. And again, no hard feelings if I came across kind of harsh against some of these companies, but I think that's just kind of the way it is. I mean, if you disagree, yell at me at the comments. Flame me in the comments. I probably deserve it. All right. Peace out, guys.